New Media Comedy Worldwide presents Comedy Legacy Series with Jim Mendrinos. And now, your host, Jim Mendrinos.
Hello, everybody. This is Jim Mendrinos, and welcome.
From New Media Comedy Worldwide Studios. New Media Comedy Worldwide presents Comedy Legacy Series with Jim Mendrinos. And now, your host, Jim Mendrinos.
Hello, everybody. This is Jim Mendrinos, and welcome to the Comedy Legacy Show. We have a great guest in store for you today. One of the best compliments that you can give a comedian is that nobody sounds like him. Nobody does what he does. And I can't think of somebody who fits that description more than today's guest, DC Benny. DC is a storyteller. DC does characters, but he doesn't just do the voices, he inhabits them and does a whole 360-degree embodiment of the characters. He's somebody that has always carved out a very unique path artistically, and he's a voice that I think newer comics, the next generation, needs to hear. So ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Mr. DC Benny. All right, so this one's going to be fun for me because one of my favorite comics to watch is joining us. And DC Benny, if you don't know him, DC, this is great because you are unlike every comic in the world. You are the most unique and original voice that I have seen in the longest time. You are you, and your bits don't sound like anybody else. And that's something that has always amazed me because I know you now a billion years, feels like a billion years. And you've had that original voice from the start. What did you do, and who are your influences that kind of impacted your style of comedy?
Well, first of all, thanks for that. That's very nice that you say all that. I've always enjoyed your stand-up as well, my friend. So
thank you.
I appreciate it. I had, my route is kind of circuitous, with stand-up. I grew up, my parents were very specific about what we were allowed to watch. Like they had a quality control. We had a little black and white Emerson TV, and they picked out very specific things. And so there was Monty Python. I was allowed to watch Monty Python. Sanford and Son was a stuff that they thought was funny, like All in the Family. I'm trying to think, and there were a lot of like these sort of odd movies, like, just foreign movies. I grew up watching a lot of foreign movies as a child, like in my formative years. So I had a kind of tweaked sense of humor, so it wasn't like traditional stand-up. I didn't see that till much later, till like in my teens. But I grew up like seeing Peter Sellers and The Party and stuff like that. And so it wasn't like, it was more comedic actors. I also had my dad got me this record when I was a kid. I had a record player, and it was these James Thurber stories, Tales of Our Times. And Peter Ustinov, this actor, read the stories, and he did all the voices in the stories. And I just thought it was the funniest thing ever. Like, he would do he wouldn't just read a story, but he did all the voices of all the little characters in the story. And I feel like those kind of things definitely influenced me comedically on a kind of subconscious level. And then, I just had guys that I just, the Pryors and Robert Klein and all those guys, I just loved watching later. I mean, even the Dice Man, I loved to watch the Dice Man. It was like you weren't allowed to listen to him or whatever, so it was such a forbidden thing,
Yeah.
So it was a real mishmash for me. That's a long answer to your question, man.
No, but it makes sense. I mean, what you do kind of, it reminds me of for me, it kind of reminds me of what the beat writers would be if they were stand-ups. You know, it's intensely personal. It doesn't hide its intelligence, and you're not afraid to take your time. You're a storyteller on stage, you know, even in your stand-up. And that's not to say that you don't have quick punchlines, because, dude, you do. Brutally quick and very funny. But your bits have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Consistently, you take us on a journey. Is that something that you did as a choice, or is that just kind of the way you evolved?
It evolved. You know what? It evolved. I have to give my wife credit for that a lot, because when I first started out doing stand-up, I was, you know, I was a white comic. I mean, I still am, but working in in black rooms, and I would just do characters. Because I was afraid of bombing, you know. I mean, every time you could get booed off, you know. So I had like an extra hurdle. So I would just bring the concentrate. But what I used to do to get people to laugh that I would just tell them about something that happened during the day, or some funny story that happened during the week. But I could never bring that to the stage. I would just kind of extract the characters from the story and go up there, and it would kill, you know. It would really kill. But I felt like there wasn't a lot of me in there. It was just the characters. And then one day I was telling my wife a story about going to a prom with this drug dealer dude had threatened me that I had to take his sister to the prom, who was like 400 pounds, you know. And I told my wife that story, and she's like, "You got to tell that story on stage." And I was like, "Well, you know, there's all this stuff in between and whatever. It's going to be quiet. You know, people aren't going to be laughing." She's like, "You got to tell that story on stage." So I went and I tried it, and it eventually became, you know, through trial and error, the first story I did on stage, the biscuit story. And then after that, I couldn't look back, because I'm like, this is what I do. It's multi-dimensional. I get to be me and narrate it and have funny asides, and then I get to do the characters in the story as well, you know. So it's like making a little movie, like a little indie film, you know. So that's kind of the evolution of that, you know.
What I love most about watching you as a storyteller, there's a lot of great storytellers around, and a lot of great storytellers, you know, when we were first on the road, that we would get to see people like Ron Schock and guys like that. But what I love most about what you do storytelling wise is you're not afraid of the silence. You're not afraid to take the pause and let something drop on the audience. How long did it take you to be able to embrace that? Because that is scary shit for a comic.
It is, man. It took a lot of bombing, and you know, I'm still scared of it. It's like, it's just, you know, I don't want the silence, but the silence can also mean they're listening. They're really listening, and they want to see what's next. And it's sort of it's kind of like every time you get up there, you have to sort of reframe your vision and feel comfortable about your relationship with the audience and how they're perceiving you. And if it's going right, like if I'm feeling good and I'm up there, the silences are, they're waiting for the next punch. And then when I gauge how the story's doing, like if there's silence during the punches, well, then that's going to be a problem, you know. But it was a lot of, you know, I did a lot of weird experimental shows in like the early 90s on the Lower East Side, the surf reality shows and things like that. And, you know, I mean, it'd be like me and Rick Shapiro and Face Boy and all these random people, the ears, the Spock ears, I don't know, Reverend Ken, like all, you know, it was just, so it was so much weird stuff going on. You could really, I credit that time with letting me kind of stretch out a little bit. So, and then I would go back to the club, I would go run to the Boston Comedy Club, which, you know, there was no quarter there for anything. And then I'd go run over to like Surf Reality or Collective Unconscious, kind of stretch out a monologue or something, run it back to the Boston. That was the, you know, if it worked at the Boston, then it would, you know, then it would work, you know, then it would work. That was really the you know, the killing ground there. But I kind of, I think just, you know, taking pieces and working them in different environments really helped. You know, it's getting out of the comedy club and then coming back into the comedy club helped with the the silences or the quiet times in between the jokes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because you dance around between a lot of different types of shows. I mean, as you said, in the early days, you started primarily in the African American, shows, and then you've always been in mainstream rooms like Gotham and the Strip and Caroline's and Boston Comedy Club, and then you're also doing the alternative rooms like Surf Reality. Do you prep different for those? Do you have to approach those shows differently?
I think so. I think, in a perfect world, I'd like to say no, but realistically, there's certain types of nuance and material that's not going to work with certain crowds. And I would find out, the hard way that, when I worked in like the Uptown in Harlem, early 90s, there were jokes that I could do for all Black crowds that when I got to a mainstream room, it just would go over everybody's head. They wouldn't get the references or whatever. I had a joke about, which came from a real situation. I was standing in front of the Uptown, there was gunfire, and the comics I was standing with were identifying what kind of gun it was. They were like, that's a 9mm or whatever. And it was just so funny to me that everybody was so calm about it. And it was this sort of analytical, and then I would take that across to the mainstream rooms, and it seemed fictitious. Like people wouldn't believe, that actually happened. So there were, and then vice versa. There were things that I could bring into, from the mainstream rooms to like the Black rooms, and they wouldn't work or whatever. So if I have any opportunity to prepare for a set in a particular room or a particular crowd, I'll kind of go through stuff a little bit and be like, maybe that's not going to work, or maybe that's not going to work. But it's also, sometimes I just let it roll out and see what happens, especially if it's a new thing. But sometimes I think less more. I think now I just kind of let it come out, and it's going to come out how it is. And you guys are either with me or not. But I think more so before, maybe, over the years, I would try to prepare a little bit, especially just opening up, getting that first laugh, I think what was part of the process.
What I really enjoy watching on stage is those rare times. It doesn't happen a lot because you've got such stage presence, but those rare times when the audience heckles, because you get heckled differently than any other comic. You get heckled with the audience agreeing with you more than I've ever seen anybody else.
No one's ever said that. That's funny, man. Wow, I got to think about that now.
Because I can't tell you how many times, the few times I've seen you be heckled, it's never a "you suck" or "that's not funny." It's always, "I was just thinking that," or "yes, absolutely." It's almost like signifying. So what is it that you think you're doing as a writer or a performer that makes the audience feel so comfortable that it feels like a personal journey for them as well?
What I hope to do and what I try to do, and when I coach guys, I tell them this. I say, again, what you strive for as a comedian, or what I believe you should strive for, is that whatever you did when you made people laugh that first time, and that before you did comedy, when you were around your friends or family, you want to take that feeling and translate it to a room full of strangers, so that they feel like they know you, and you feel comfortable enough to say the stuff that you would say in front of your friends to them in the same manner, that you can be natural, that you can have your most natural delivery, which it took me years and years and years and years to get to that place. And I still struggle with it, but I feel like that is, when it's working, then you get the positive heckles, as you might call them. You get the affirmations of, like, they feel comfortable enough to, like, we're almost in a conversation together. That they don't even realize, that they think you're helping you do your show. So I feel like that's what I strive to do, man. It's just to make the audience feel like we're at a big cookout or at a bar talking, or whatever on a road trip together. That was probably the best, the best analogy I can think of, is that we're on a road trip together. I'm telling these stories to kill time. And, hopefully if they jump in, it doesn't derail the story, but I appreciate the enthusiasm, if they're not shouting, you suck or whatever, but if they're like, oh yeah, that's, whatever, that's I look at that as a positive.
Yeah. Now let's talk process, because I've talked to a couple of storytellers, and some of them are meticulous, and I write everything down on the page, and it's almost a script. And there are those guys that they're like, I have a loose idea, I go up, I talk, and then I just translate what I've done on stage. Where do you fall on the spectrum? What's your process for creating a brand new bit?
It varies. It varies. Some stuff I will write out meticulously. But I think more so with the stories, I think I have a sort of beginning, middle, and end. And then I'll have bullets, bullets that I want to hit during it that propel the thing along. But how I get there is very improvised, So if I have the beginning, like I'm working on a story now, when I first moved to New York, about living with this guy, and he would give me these random jobs. I'm living in Hell's Kitchen on top of Kaufman Surplus and next to Show World, and I had no money, and I moved to the city, to do comedy and whatever. And this guy would just give me these random jobs to help out so I could pay the rent. And one of the jobs was I had to pick up this dog for a fashion shoot and put it in a cab and take it to the Plaza Hotel. And I got there and the dog was dyed blue, and I had to have this blue kind of toy poodle with me going to the Plaza Hotel. And there's a whole story about it that just was crazy at the time. I'd only been in New York for a little while, and I've got this blue dog, and I'm there. I get to the Plaza. There's a PETA demonstration. People are like getting angry at me. Ladies with blue hair yelling at me about the blue dog, but I'm going through the story now, trying to remember everything that happened. But part of it is describing what happened, and that's the part. That's the part that I kind of write on a little bit, like, not just the details of what happened, but my take on it. And that I think is what I separate the story between the events and my take on it. And the take on it is where the writing happens a little more, I think.
Now, I've worked with storytellers like Ron Schock, who was very adamant of, you don't embellish, you don't add, you tell the story, you can put your opinions on it, but you tell the story truthfully. And then I've worked with storytellers who are there like, here's a nugget of truth, and this is kind of my fantasy towards it. How much do you stick to absolute reality, and how much do you play?
I think, well, first of all, I think it's entertainment. Okay, you're there to entertain. So, I'm not in the school of the Mark Twain where, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. But what might happen is that the things in the story, and maybe some of them, I'd say most of them are pretty close to as it happened. But sometimes, just to move it along, I will pick out something that happened, but maybe at another time, and drop it in a little bit just to propel it along. I'd say they're mostly truthful, but like I think most history that alleged recorded history and everything, I think it's all subject. I don't feel like anybody out there tells a 100% true story. I don't care who it is. The best old dudes on the porch down in Alabama smoking a corncob pipe, drinking the corn mashings and all that. I think everybody, you're going to embellish somewhat with it. And I feel like anybody aspiring storyteller, anybody doing that, just make it entertaining, make it entertaining. And the truth generally will be funnier, but if it has a little nudge, that's no harm done.
I want to talk about exactly what you did in that answer, and that was the sheer amount of details you put in when describing something. The old dudes on the porch with the corn cob pipe, drinking the corn. You just infused it with so many details. Is that one of the key components to structuring a good story? Is it making it visual?
I think that's what makes it, first of all, that's what makes it believable to me, is the details are hard to make up. Like I always use this example. You can break into an old car, okay, and to steal it. Or you can take the tennis ball and cut the hole in the bottom and put it up against the lock and pop it so the air pushes the button up, and that kind of detail makes it a lot more compelling. And somebody who's done that, you know what I'm saying is like that's the type of thing where that's not necessarily hilarious detail or whatever, but details are what make stories. Details, when I listen to somebody, I remember once my car broke down and this guy picked me up in a flatbed, and we were going on the BQE. My car had broken down, and I called AAA, but they won't pick you up if you break down on the BQE because the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, because they have some deal with the mob that you have to be off on an exit, so you have to use one of their tow trucks. So this dude picks me up. He's got the teardrop tattoos and everything. We're driving along. He's talking to me, and I look in the back of the truck, and he had kind of costumes hanging back there. Like it looked like Halloween costumes. And the first one was a Hasidic costume with the payas and everything. And I'm talking to this guy. I'm like, what is it? It's August. I'm like, what's those costumes? The guy told me that he did repo on the side. He would repo cars, and a lot of times he had to go to Williamsburg and repo the Hasidic Jews minivans. And he would want to blend in when he did that, because so there wouldn't be an issue. So he'd wear the outfit, like the payas and everything. This guy had the teardrop tattoos, and I'm thinking that this guy with the tattoos and the fucking hood things, it was so funny to me, but it was such a great detail of what could have just been getting in your car breaks down, you get picked up by the flatbed, you go you get towed, you go to the station. But here there was like a mini adventure within that if you just listen and look around. You know what I mean? So that would be my answer to that.
All right. How often do you write?
I wish every day. I'll go through periods where it's every day, especially if I'm preparing for something. And then sometimes, look, I get lazy. Sometimes I get lazy, or I'm working on other stuff, and there'll be breaks. But I would like to say every day, but that would not be true. I strive to do that. And there'll be long chunks where I do that. And then there'll be periods where I kind of let it build up a little bit, and I'll scribble something, or I'll make a note, and I build up the excitement. It's like a little foreplay, and the writing is the release a little bit, or the leading up to the release. So it's like, if I know I've got, this idea, I've got this idea, it'll kickstart the writing again, So I think that's my problem. But I should be doing it every day.
And if anyone's listening, they should be doing it every day.
Yes, every day.
Let's talk about, going back in and revising, because one of the things I love about watching you work is sometimes you'll bring back an older bit, and I'll go, oh, I love this bit, but it'll be totally revised, totally different, and you kind of keep putting your fingers into the mix and redoing it. Two things. One, how come? And two, is that you think a vital part of what you do?
I think there's a two-pronged answer to that. One is sometimes I'll bring back an older bit, like in reference. It's if I'm doing a story, like I have the story about being on a cruise ship, okay, and I have a bit I've been doing it's got to be 20 years about I'm Jewish. I got a German Shepherd. He's always looking at me like he's thinking about the good old days, whatever. I have this whole bit about it. and I did it in this story on this cruise ship, so I have to repeat it to make the story work. So there's that way of doing it. But then there's another, I think the more, the way that I do it more is that I'll have a lot of these stories is they're not done. You know, I have this, my last album, I had 2 stories that I've been working on, and the ending just hadn't happened yet. It hadn't happened. And it took time for it to actually happen. I was struggling with what the ending is, I was writing and writing and writing. And then the endings organically happened later in my life, like 4 or 5 years after the story, just in time for the album to come out. But they happened, or I recognized them happening. So I feel like that part, it's like these chunks are kind of always being molded. They're clay that I'm always kind of molding a little bit. So if something is familiar, and I'm retooling it or whatever, it just means it wasn't finished in the first place,
Yeah. Now, a lot of guys that started out when I did, and then you started a couple of years after I did, really rely on pop culture, really rely on stereotypes, really rely on, I don't want to say the easy way because nothing's the easy way in stand-up, but kind of rely on some shortcuts. And you've never done that. You've always tried to keep it as personal as you can. And my question to you is it a conscious decision to block out the easy way, or is it more of you just want to write this way?
I feel like, all right, I don't know. To me, it's not easy. To me, that's just, you're always watching the news, you're topical. But to me, it doesn't last. I like things that last. I like compiling a body of work that isn't reliant on a certain time period. And the only time I strayed from that is during 9/11. I had a whole chunk of material on 9/11 because it was just so in my face. We lived by the Brooklyn Bridge, and I woke up, my dog's barking. I look out the window and the towers are on fire. And then, just being in New York at that time, it had such a powerful hold on me that I did write a lot of stuff about that, but which ended up in a story. I'm about to release an album, and it's got that 9/11 chunk is interspersed in one of the stories. But beyond that, that just is never something I appreciate when people do it and when they do it well and whatever, but I just felt like I wanted to compile a body of work that was kind of interlocked. It was like a journey through a life, and it wasn't dependent on news events or what music was out at the time, or trends or anything like that. So I don't look down on that, and I think at all. I think that people, there's a gift. I just specifically went a different route. And if somebody, like, if I have to write, what do you call it? Ray Allen's Comedy Cellar Night at the Cellar thing, that Comedy Cellar. If I had to write some topical stuff for that, I wrote a bunch of topical stuff for that. But then it's like you're done with it. And some people like that cycle of writing it. You put it out there, you get really good at that, so you can be like bang, 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 and you're done with it. And the next bit, and the next event, and the next event. For me, I like to have it so 10 years later, it's 20 years later, ideally, it still works, because it's just a super personal part of a life that was lived. That's what I strive for.
Now, there are stories I've written about different ages in my life that I do on stage. For instance, I used to run away a lot when I was a kid, and I'll do bits about running away. As I get older, and now I have a 14-year-old, and I look and I go, oh, I ran away when I was 14, and now I have an impact. Do you update and bring in the new information as you're telling those stories, or once you set it, you're kind of leaving it?
I feel like I feel like I kind of leave it unless it doesn't have an ending, like the two I described to
Yeah.
you. You know, if it doesn't have an ending, unless of course I haven't finished the thing. Like there's some I'm fiddling around with now that over the years I just couldn't get right, and you know, I'm still fiddling with them, but I think for me is I like to be done with them and move on to the next chunk. But what you're talking about, like the being 14, running away, and then having a 14-year-old and running away, I think that would definitely, you know, trigger some momentum for me. The translation would be if I had a chunk that I never worked out about being 14 and running away, and then there was, and then I had a 14-year-old that was, you know, it was that time, that would bring it together. That would be the thing that would bring it together, you know.
All right, but if it's pre-existing bit, you kind of leave it when you think it's done.
I think so. You know, I mean, I've played around with stuff a little bit and done a couple tags, but I'm afraid of deconstructing it too much. Yeah, I used to watch Attell do these bits, and then he would, I don't know if it was like a sabotage thing, but you know, then certain nights these bits would kill. They were just killer bits, and certain nights I'd see him do it, and he'd be like hee haw haw, hee haw haw, you know, and wah wah wah, and he would sort of he almost would like punish the audience, by deconstructing them or sabotaging them a little bit. You know, like you guys, you know, he was sick of doing them, something like that. And I just didn't. I sometimes I felt like I might go down that road, and I didn't want to go down that road. I just wanted to leave them and have them be a finished piece of work and move on to the next thing. You know, and this is not to say anything bad about Attell, who I love watching. It's just I thought it was such a funny process. He was this prolific guy, you know, and he would do these jokes, and I would be waiting for the joke to come, and then he would kind of mess with the punchline, and just to like, it looked like sabotaging it, you know.
And you knew the joke was out of his act really soon after that.
Yeah.
Whenever he would do that, it almost seemed like that was his process of retiring a bit. Yeah. Let's talk about it, because you've had a long career, and you've stayed relevant all these years, you know, and you've you know, not only relevant but respected. I mean, people go to you to learn the form of doing stories on stage. Do you get bored with material? Do you retire material? Do you just let it go?
I do get bored with it, and you know, I had a period for about 5 years where I was like, I didn't want to go on the road. I just want to stay in the city and do the, you know, do spots and stuff like that. And at the time I was selling some real estate during the day. I was doing that during the day, so I didn't have to go on the road, because we were doing some things here, and it just I was kind of burnt out. But I got so bored with I wasn't generating a lot of new stuff, and I got so sick. There's a 20-minute chunk of New York material. Oh, I get so sick of it. But when I don't do it for a really long time, and like it's a late night at the comic strip and people are drunk or whatever, and I have that in my back pocket, I'm like, boom, here's some Subway stuff. Here's the heroin guy for you. Here's the, you know, the homeless joke. Here's a taxi cab story. You know, I feel great that I have that stuff in my back pocket. But then, you know, you don't do it for so long, you kind of forget parts of it. So, you know, you're up there, people are drunk late at night, it's the check spot, whatever, and you're like, I'll just break this tried and true out. And you're like, wait a minute, what was that? What was that punch? You know. So I do, you know, I don't remember what I have retired because I've forgotten it. I've forgotten those bits, but there's like a New York chunk that I hold on to. That's like, you know, it's like a half hour, you know, no fat monster stories and bits and chunks just for those late nights, you know, for those rough times that it's pretty old. I'll say that. It's pretty old.
The survival set.
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about burning out? Because I don't think people realize it. You said that you had about a 5-year period where you had burnt out a little bit. I know for me, in the early 2000s, there was a time where it was just like, all right, let's do this again. And I don't think people realize that you can fall in and out of love with what we do, and it is the most lasting relationship. But what do you think triggered your burnout, and what did you do to get past it?
I think, certainly financial stress triggers it. It's that my whole plan was that I never wanted to rely on the road. I always wanted to be in New York City, doing spots, making money doing commercials or TV, this, and then writing or whatever. And then the road was sort of the gravy. But it just, I just hit a point where things really kind of dried up. They dry. You hit these peaks and valleys, things dry up, and bills got to be paid. And I'm sure people watching this or listening to this, you don't make a lot of money in the city doing these spots at these shows. They don't realize these showcase clubs. You don't make a lot of money doing it. No matter how many you do, they don't pay a lot. So they're very prestigious. They're great, but if you have bills to pay, it's very difficult to make a living doing that. You need alternate sources of income. So I think for me, falling in and out of love was very much just the stress of having to pay bills. And, I had a mom my mom had Alzheimer's, and we had to take care of her. And there was a lot of things that were tough. And comedy is a very unforgiving business. It's, the business, I hate the business. I'll be honest with you. I can't stand the business. I love the art. I love performing, but the business is just, is cruel. And people, will tell you, look, you're not 25 anymore. We're not betting on you. We're looking on the young. We're going to bet on these young horses. So you no matter what you've done, no matter how funny you are, even though a lot of these guys are embryonic in what they're put them on a late show. We don't know what's going to happen when they run through their 10 minutes or whatever. We're still betting on them. So that's the business. So I feel like that struggle sort of was the impetus for the in and out for me. I always did stand up, and I always did it as frequently as possible. But I just realized I want to have like a little side hustle that takes the financial pressure off, so I can say no when I need to some of these shit gigs, that'll kill you, that back to your question, is the type of thing that contributes to being burnt out, as you get, is the struggle of this business. It's a very, very, very hard business, and to try and there's not a lot of logic associated with success, and you really have to be a really good business person. And that was not, I was not a great business person. I was an artist, and I've learned to be a better business person. But when I started out, I didn't know shit about business. I didn't know how, I just, did not really realize how it's incredibly important to, plot things out. And I would watch guys who did that, and be like, be in awe of that later. Like, I look back at guys who I, started with and everything, who were really, they had a good business sense, and wish that I had, I wish that I had made some different decisions earlier.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Yeah.
But now you've done, a lot of TV, and to be a storyteller on TV has got to be one of the most difficult things to do, because the pressure to pare down a set to network standards has to be soul crushing at times. Can you talk us through the process of what it takes for you to do what you do on a television show?
It's not a good pairing. really, and it certainly has contributed to me not being more successful because, at least the majority of time when they don't, if you just do a straight monologist stand-up set, it's going to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb anyway. The storytelling, fitting that in to the format of network television, it's oil and water. It's a really hard thing to do. I mean, I've done it and I've trimmed, the last comic standing thing, I had to chop up some stories to get them in there, and it worked. But when you see how they edit them and all that stuff, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the viewer. It's like it detracts from the performance. They're like, what? How did we get from here to there? And I just want to be like, I wish I could tell you the whole thing. I wish I could, but I can't. There's time. There's this. There's standards and practices. There's blah 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 blah. So it's not a great pairing to be a story. I think that can change, and I also think it's also how much somebody, one of these shot callers wants to push you. If they really want to push you, if you got somebody behind, if you have the machine behind you, well, then you'll get a little more leeway if you're doing a late night set or something like that. But if you're, of a certain age, you've got to
be our age.
Yeah, you got to dance around and really, learn to edit and all that. And that's a valuable skill, regardless. You learn to edit. You make it work as best you can, but it's not. It's for those kind of things. It's better to have straight jokes. It just on a strategic level.
Now let's talk about the physicality you bring to the performance, because you're not afraid to use your body. You're not just standing there. There's a whole lot of comics that do characters, and their characters are just voices. It's almost like listening to a voiceover artist on stage. You'll change your body posture. The junkie bit is the one I would point to let someone see exactly what you're doing. You're not afraid to use your entire body as your instrument. Was that something you had to learn? Was that something that came naturally?
I think, look, at times I dial it back a little bit, but like in my own perfect world of stand-up, I like to act out. I like to make it 3D. I like to, it's not just a voice. That's why I really dislike when people are like, oh, that's that dude that does voices. I don't just do voices. Part of the character is acting it out. And, I used to do this character, the Great Habibi. And it was like he was this angry Middle Eastern comic. And I would come on as the Great Habibi. And people would believe I was this guy. Arabic guys would believe I was this dude. I'd throw in a couple of Arabic words. And I would come on and I would do this whole act as a, this kind of Middle Eastern fish out of water guy talking about moving to New York from some fictional country, and all my cultural observations, and I would do crowd work and whatever. And the whole beauty of that character was that people believed I was really this dude. Afterwards, people come up and be like, wala, 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 hale, mahale, wala, wala. I'd be like, really, man, I have no idea. That was just a character that I did, but thank you very much. And that to me is the sign of, it's like you're going like Kurtz into the jungle, man. You got to immerse yourself in it, and that way you don't hear the negativity. And it just becomes more believable. It just resonates more, as opposed to just the voice. And look, there are brilliant impressionists who do just the voice, and it's amazing. But I never wanted to be that. I wanted to be, just completely immersed in it.
Yeah, and it's really fun to watch when you do any type of character that has immersion, because there's all of us that know, you and see it, and then there's the audience that is believing it, and so much fun to watch the audience's reaction when somebody takes them on a journey like that. I also want to talk just a little bit about, when I started, there were a whole lot of great, and I started at 18. There were a whole lot of great stand-ups that saw me and were so kind to me and were there like, okay, Jim, you got raw talent. This is kind of how you write a joke. This is what you're doing wrong. Were there people that helped to shepherd you and guide you through your early years?
That would be the minority. I don't know what it was about me, but a lot of guys got threatened by me. I won't name names, but there were a couple people, one in particular who really tried to help me. Tony Woods. There was a guy named Tony Woods, a very talented, funny comedian, a friend, who reached out, tried to help me, got me my first college gig, even though it didn't work out because we were late, because Tony Woods is always late. But like really tried to help a young guy coming up. But there were a lot of older dudes who got very threatened by me, were just kind of mean and kind of, tried to get, when I finally got a manager, Dave Becky, there were guys in his roster that were like, why are you working with this dude? Like trying to get this guy to drop me, things like that just, I never really understood. I didn't do anything to anybody, but they just didn't like me, or they felt threatened by me. So I have always tried to help young guys coming up, and female comedians were always nice to me. Generally, I got a lot more help from female comedians than I did, from like guys who had been doing it a while. They weren't really, female comedians weren't threatened by me. They were like, oh, we could set up some, this guy's going to do all right, and maybe we could work together later or something. And I don't know. I never, I didn't have that with women comedians, but I always try to help young guys coming up. If anybody's they got a question, if they come up to me with a question, or if they're like, hey, could you do I have a little show at this bar, if it's a Tuesday night and I'm not doing, yeah, man, I'll drop by, I'll do your show at the bar. Oh shit, that's great. How do you do this? How do you do that? Why not help these guys? It's so important. I feel like it's our job to do that. I don't want to hate on these young dudes. I want to, these guys are the future of what we do. And I really do try to help them. Now, if there's someone who's a pain in the ass, like I see sometimes these guys that are coming up that they treat other people like shit, they're nice to, if I see somebody being nice to me because they need something from me, but they're treating their peers horribly, I'm not going to be supportive of that person. I'm going to pull them aside and be like, hey man, you cannot do that. That's not how we do. Okay. You need to check that behavior. And those guys tend to be very successful. They tend to be very successful.
Which goes back to your point of the industry being unfair.
Yes. You know what I mean? But I feel it is incumbent upon us to help people. And I certainly remember the few that were supportive of me or encouraging, and I remember the ones that weren't, and that was unfortunately the majority. So what can you do, man? What can you do?
It really does suck, but people don't realize that if you're truly a comic, you're never retiring. You're not going away. No. And, you do remember the people that were shitty to you all these years later.
Yes, I do. I got a little list. I'm a Scorpio. I got a little list up here.
Yeah, I think my list is on people that I've blocked on Facebook. So a whole bevy of comics that I've blocked that are just like, I have no need to talk to you ever again. So you do teach storytelling, and you teach stand-up to a lot of the younger comics, and everyone raves about what they're learning in your class because you teach an artistic approach. You're not doing that cookie cutter, write 20 jokes on puppies. You're talking about the process of creating art. What is it that most young stand-ups are overlooking in that process of creating art?
I think they have an idea of what comedy is, or how it's supposed to sound, which is maybe influenced by pop culture, and they're missing out on what is naturally funny about them. It's getting overlooked. You know, they're so focused on, like in the 80s where, people would want to sound like Seinfeld, or they'd want to sound a certain way, or like Dennis Leary or this guy or that guy. It's almost that these guys are so caught up in the idioms and the language and the sarcasm and the irony and all that, and they're not honing in on what their voice could be, recreating that, which is what makes them uniquely funny. And it's the hardest thing to find, but if you jump on it while the seed is still sprouting, you got a better shot at it. And I feel like these guys, it's almost like they miss what's naturally funny about themselves. I think that's the biggest mistake. They think it's one thing, but it's really something else that they're going to find out 15 years later, if they stay in the game, So that is I think the number one mistake I see.
Yeah. And what is it that you're looking forward to doing in your career that you still haven't done?
Look, I'd love to have that one special that is just the quintessential special, that, you can be like, I'm done after that. That's the fantasy. I don't think you can ever be like that, but you look at it and you're like, that is as close to a perfect representation of my work that could be. Honestly, and I would love, I've been working on projects independently for years. I know you do the same thing.
Yeah.
You can't just do stand up. You have to generate, you have to use your creative juices you get with a friend, you write something, he shoots something, you do this, you're constantly, whatever it is, that creative process for one of those things to fly that I've done over all these years, that would be great. I've done a ton of these damn things, and it seems like every damn time it gets so close, and it just doesn't really push through. So part of it is just I love doing them, and then but it would be nice to sort of have it's sort of, I think all this would be leading me to a place where I think all stand-ups want to be, whereas that I'm not at yet, where I could be in touch with the people who enjoyed what I do, with the fans, that I somehow connect with them, so I'm able to always have that connection with them. Right now, I don't know, there's some here, there's some there. This one writes something on YouTube, this one this one that, but it's just very disjointed. I don't have them. I'm not in touch with them. So I think that would be sort of a goal that I would love, to achieve. That I'm always been working toward, but it's a mystery to me. I don't know how you do it.
If you ever find out, can you let me know? Because I'm kind of looking at that too. DC, this has been really enlightening and a great conversation. You're incredibly generous with your time and incredibly generous with the young comics. Where can people find you? Where online can we find out all things DC Benny?
I have a YouTube channel. If you just go on DC Benny on YouTube, there's a channel, and I post stories that I'm working on. So they're rough. They're not finished. That's what I've been doing during this whole time. It's like I try to post one a week. And that's been great. That's been cathartic, and but you can see the that would be there'd be a lot of silence if I was doing those in clubs. I'll say that. I'm the real DC Benny on Instagram. I do have an album coming out sometime soon called Adrift in Predicaments on 800 Pound Gorilla Records, and there is a special that I think all things comedy is gonna get down with. So I think we've been talking about that. So that would be fantastic. That we shot I shot it. We shot it in black and white. It's just a lot of these specials I see. It's like this guy's got a backup dancer and leather pants and a DJ, and it's like, what the fuck is this? This is in a comedy club, and it's just the bare bones, and it's like 10 stories. And so Real DC Benny on Instagram, and my YouTube channel. Check out my YouTube channel. It's DC Benny on YouTube. You'll see it.
You got it. DC, thanks for the conversation, and hopefully you'll drop by again and talk some more.
Absolutely, brother. Take care of yourself. Continued success to you, all right?
You too, DC. Talk to you soon.
Later.
Bye-bye. I love it when I can spend an hour with a guest and actually feel like I learned something in the process. DC's had an incredible journey. He's had a lot of rough obstacles to overcome, but he's managed to be successful, and he's managed to play in so many different types of venues and so many different types of audiences that it's fun to watch him work. It's fun to watch him develop, and it's just going to continue. His special that's coming out is going to be unbelievable, and after that, the next set of stories will even be better than that. We had such an amazing time talking to him, and storytellers especially, you need to go to his YouTube page and watch him. But we will have another fantastic guest for you next week, and please tune back in. I'm Jim Mendrinos, and thank you for watching the Comedy Legacy series. Good night, everybody.
This has been a New Media Comedy Worldwide production.
Thank you for watching the Comedy Legacy series. New episodes air every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern on New Media Comedy TV YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.